to record on this computer. Okay, so the conversation is now being recorded and will be shared with you along with the other link today. So again, the streams of consciousness are key words, expressions, the verbiage that people use when you're talking to them. All right. This is not yet analyzed. It's in its raw form, undigestible form yet. Okay. Focus of this presentation is to provide you with an overview of the theoretical underpinnings without going deep into the theory. But as I was saying yesterday, I'm a big proponent of understanding the theoretical underpinnings, understanding the philosophical underpinnings of whatever research methodology you're using. It gives you grounding. It anchors you in that research methodology. You come across as more knowledgeable when you're talking. And you know, I'm using this technique, but here's the reason why I'm using this technique, because this technique has such and such. So an overview of the theoretical underpinnings and pillars of IPA outline the dissertation topics and kinds of novel research that IPA undertakes. So obviously, one of the things that I was just talking about is what kind of research phenomena does IPA look at? Okay. And by the way, Ajanta, from the standpoint of organizations, IPA is an excellent strategy to use because, and especially given the illuminating nature of our conversation yesterday, in which you shared what kind of research you do. Wow, this is a fertile approach for you to use. So I would really encourage you to use this approach, and of course, not only during these two sessions, but I'm also available to you for any consultation or any feedback after the session, and that applies to all of you. If you have any questions, concerns, you're going to have lots and lots of questions after the seminars, believe me. And those that are reading and doing the research, that's why I shared with you an exhaustive link containing readings, resources. There was a Jamia Millia folder. I've done 2 huge workshops for Jamia Millia in the previous years. They were extremely well attended, full classes. So in that, you have a lot of papers, articles, research pieces on grounded theory, which I'll talk about a little bit later today. So I don't want to digress. So we'll craft phenomenological research questions. So remember yesterday I was saying that it should not be the cart pulling the horse. It should be the horse pulling the cart. What do I mean by that? Until you know your topic and until you know the research phenomena that you're after, what is it that keeps you awake at night about this research phenomena? And then from that research phenomena, you're able to extract a research question. Remember, I shared with you research question. What is it like for an unwed mother? What is it like to suffer from chronic lower back pain? What is it like to be marginalized as part of the LGBTQ community? Right? Those are all research questions. Once you're able to craft and frame a good research question, your study becomes that much more robust. Because now,
Anil,
yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you?
Go ahead, VM.
Identifying the research phenomena and extracting the research questions, till this part, is it common for both qualitative and quantitative?
Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference there. You have to understand, in qualitative, you're going for discovery. In quantitative, oftentimes, and not always, oftentimes, you're validating a hypothesis. You start with a hypothesis or hypotheses, hypothesis number 1, right, Nupur? Hypothesis number 1, hypothesis number 2. Then you go ahead and use some grand theory as an umbrella to shed light on the hypothesis, to prove or disprove the hypothesis. Through what? Through respondents' questionnaires, interviews, and all that. So it's distinctly different. Okay, the approach, the foci, very different.
So in qualitative study, there is no hypothesis.
In qualitative, very rarely do we do have a hypothesis in certain, and especially like you may when you're doing ethnography. Okay, I'll give you. I mean, that's a good question, by the way. Excellent question. when you're doing ethnography and you're going into an organization to study its culture, right? Yesterday I told you ethno means culture. Ethnography means the study of culture, right? What is it that you do? You're trying to understand the underlying culture of an organization through their meetings, through their conversations, through the water cooler conversations, through informal, formal conversations, through lunch break conversations, through the communications that are going, through the seminars that are occurring through meetings that go on, right? You sit in as a fly on the wall. You're an observer. You're not, unlike action research, where you get involved clinically with the organization and with the stakeholders. Usually, ethnographers are sitting back and observing. They are making sense of the culture that is evolving, right? And that's not to say that they will not get involved in a discussion. They may ask a question, but they may then sit back and wait for what comes out as a response. But they're addressing the culture. So in that case, they may start with a hypothesis, or the organization may start with some hypothesis. They might say, you know what? It's a hypothesis, maybe, Kiran, that the culture of this organization is right now broken. There is something going wrong here. As in, people are not gelling, people are not working together in a team, right? Our productivity is suffering. There's a lot of attrition. So there is something happening in the culture, but we don't know what. We are only making an educated guess that, let's say, I'm giving you an example, that teamwork is broken. So the hypothesis might be, VM, that in our organization, we feel, this is coming from the CEO and the HR head and all that, they're putting their heads together, and the strategic, the CEO, all of them, the top level people are getting together. You know, we feel that this might be happening. So our hypothesis is we are suffering, our profitability, our bottom line is suffering because there is something broken in the culture of the organization, as in culture, and more specifically as in teamwork. So they hypothesize that. Now what do? Now they're not researchers. So then they call Siddharth. Call meaning they invite Siddharth's firm to come and do an ethnography on the organization. So Siddharth is a CEO of his research firm. Siddharth sends Ranjita as as the team lead, and there may be 2 or 3. There'll be Ranjita, Kiran, Ajanta on the team. Usually it's not more than 1 or 2 ethnographers at a time, because you don't want to overwhelm the whole organization. But if it is an organization like Intel, like Microsoft, which is the large organizations, 1 person is not able to do that job, right? So you have to have 2 or 3 folks out there. So now this team gets into, you are hired as ethnographers to be embedded in the organization for a certain period of time. And the period of time could be like 6 months to a year. Usually it's not short-term timeframes, like 1 week, 2 weeks. Those are very short-term. You're not going to be able to really gauge much, because you're going to be sitting in on the meetings, you're going to be talking to managers, you're going to be talking to executives to get the culture of the organization. It's a very specific job. So in that case, a hypothesis VM. So it's a long answer. I give you a long answer to a short question.
Sir, I have another question.
Yes, go
Sir,
ahead.
but like, how will we test this hypothesis? Like in quantitative study, we have certain testing methods, statistical techniques. Like
So
for
here is
this,
the thing. So there is no such thing as testing the hypothesis or validity or conformity and things of that nature that you find in quantitative studies. In qualitative studies, even though you may have a hypothesis, you're going to shed light, you're going to illuminate the hypothesis, you're going to illuminate the phenomena that you're working with through interviews, in-depth interviews. In-depth interviews of whom? You could conduct in-depth interviews of employees within the organization to shed light on what's going on. In order to do what? In order to understand the culture of the organization. And within that culture, the specific topic of teamwork. Why is teamwork getting broken up? Why are people not doing this? So does that answer your question, Ranjita? So don't get confused with the hypothesis or hypotheses in quant with hypotheses and hypotheses in qual. They're different. In quant, you'll send out questionnaires, you do to respondents, and then you get that back. And then through quantitative analysis, you're going to come to some sort of conclusions, whether your hypothesis was correct or not correct. All right. So you have to craft research questions, which I just talked about, distinguish between whatness and thatness as they relate to, and I'll talk about that in a future slide. So let's look at this once again. It is sort of like a rehash of yesterday, but it's a slightly different, nuanced approach. So let's look at this sample research question. Let's look at the first sample research question. What does engagement mean to employees? What does engagement mean to an employee? I can ask anybody on the street, hey, can you tell me what engagement means to employees? Remember, I was talking about the indirect experience. So everybody can tell you something or the other about engagement as it relates to employees within an organization, right? So they can tell me something. It's more like of an opinion rather than a lived experience. They may or may not have had the lived experience of engagement because I'm not asking them, tell me about your specific lived experience of engagement within this virtual organization. No, I'm not asking them that. I'm just saying, can you tell me about engagement? So if you notice, see my cursor in the second column, focus on engagement as an indirect employee experience. It's an indirect experience of the person that I'm questioning. And the research phenomena is, again, employee engagement, right? Is it not? Because we're discussing what? We're discussing engagement. The approach and our methodology that we would generally use for this is phenomenology, transcendental phenomenology, which is Husserl's phenomenology, pure kind of phenomenology where he's talking about the way the structures of the phenomena, the attributes of a phenomena, not necessarily with contextual items, because there is no context we are putting. Okay, did everybody see that when I asked this question, what does engagement mean to employees? I'm not throwing in a context. If I said, what does engagement mean to employees in a virtual team, which is the next one, then the context gets introduced, but I'll show you how that changes. So just stay with the first one here, transcendental phenomenology, descriptive phenomenology. Those are the kind of phenomenological approaches you might use. You're looking at thatness of experience, that meaning the indirect. Employee engagement as though it is something out there, not something that you're living through day in and day out. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. If you have questions, please ask as we go along. We're a small group, so don't be bashful. Don't feel free to ask a question. It is good to clarify as we go along. Okay. So in the second part, we are looking at what is it like for employees to experience engagement in a virtual team. Now notice, I changed the question somewhat and asked them, what is it like for employees to experience engagement in a virtual team? Now I'm asking this question in a very specific format because I want to know the experience of employees working within the organization, employees working in a virtual organization, their specific feedback, right? How they make sense of that. So the focus is on the personal meaning of engagement as a direct lived experience in a specific context. Remember, IPA usually, not always, but usually 90% of the time, IPA will have a context. Okay, so the context might be in a virtual organization, in a healthcare setting, right? In a governmental organization, an NGO. Where is this occurring? What are we really talking about? Okay, so again, the research phenomena is employee engagement. The approach or our methodology that we recommend for this kind of research question is IPA, interpretative phenomenological analysis, because now we are looking at, this was thatness, see my cursor here, now we are looking at whatness. From indirect, now we come to direct. What do I mean by whatness? Whatness is the direct ontological. Ontology meaning it's the nature of being. Okay, it's from the ontological phenomenology of Heidegger. But here is the question: what is it like for employees when we ask, what is it like to be? What is it like to feel? What is it like to emote? What is it like to quarrel? What is it like to abuse? We are asking a question that is ontological in nature. So whatness, from thatness, this comes to whatness. Any questions? Does anybody have any question on this? It's important to understand.
Still, this question is not actually pointing towards direct whatness.
Say that again. Still, I couldn't hear you.
This question, I am not able to still connect it with whatness. See, what is it like for employees to experience engagement in a virtual team? This can be asked to a third party also.
Okay, but in this particular case, we are doing direct lived experience, and you are absolutely right. Ontology doesn't necessarily mean that it always have to be direct lived experience. But here I'm talking about whatness, specifically in the context of IPA, where we are looking at direct lived experience. So I did not suggest, I hope I did not come across, and if I did, I apologize. I did not come across as saying that direct and ontological are the same. All I was saying was direct and or ontological experiences. So it could be a direct experience or an ontological experience, the nature. So I could ask, so you are very right. You could ask somebody a question of whatness to somebody even in an indirect way. What do you think, VM? What do you think it is like for an employee to feel engaged in an organization? I'm asking a question that is ontological, but I'm asking it in the context of indirectness, right? And so that the only reason I put thatness and whatness in separate columns is to be able to discuss this. Now, by the same token, thatness of the experience can also be in the IPA realm, because I could ask, what did that experience feel like to you? Or what did that, or better still, what did that experience, VM, feel like to your boss? Now, you didn't have the experience, but you are having some attitudes, some feelings some thoughts about how your boss felt. Am I right? So you're asking an indirect experience. So that's an excellent question, by the way. I commend you for asking such a pertinent question, because this is what a interactive dialogue, interactive seminar can do. It opens up whole new avenues rather than a presenter sitting there and running through all the slides, 1, 2, 3, 4 points without a discussion of anything happening. So thank you for doing that. So I'm going to move to the next. The focus upon IPA. It's an ontological nature of being. What is it like to be? Now, let me clarify. It is not always what is it like to be, meaning what is it like for you to be gay? What is it like for you to be straight? What is it like for you to be a member of the LGBT community? What is it like for you to raise children? I can also ask you a question within IPA. How do you make sense of such and such? Or what does such and such mean to you in terms of a phenomenon? Right? Now, when I'm asking that, just be careful here. When I'm asking what does such and such mean to you, I'm asking for your direct lived experience. The reason I recruited you for the study is because you've had an experience with that phenomenon. Therefore, I'm asking you to reflect on that experience. Okay. IP is about meaning making and sense making. How do you make sense of something? How do you make meaning of something? I'm not asking a participant, Ranjita, to define, to describe a phenomenon. That is not what IPA and phenomenology is about. We're not asking you for descriptions. I'm asking you for your narrative. I'm asking you for your episodes, whatever happened, your stories. I'm interested in your stories and how your stories connect with the phenomenon. And I, as a researcher, am catalyzing that conversation in you because, if you're an average interviewer, you're going to get average results. If you're a good interviewer, you get good results. If you're an excellent interviewer, you probably end up getting excellent data. And it comes with experience. Not everybody is trained to be the best. It takes time. And it is like attending workshops such as this that hone your experience with asking questions. What kind of probing questions you're going to ask? What kind of probing questions you are not supposed to ask? It can really upset somebody. So for instance, a woman who in her childhood, in her teens, had suffered a emotional trauma or physical abuse or whatever the case may be growing up, and your research phenomena is centered around abuse, you will have to be careful to tread a little lightly because you don't want to upset her. You don't want her to feel really shaken up about that. You can ask about the experience. And if she doesn't want to share that experience because it is hurtful to her, it reminds her of some ugliness in the past, you don't want to push, nahi, please ji, batao uske bare mein. Please tell me more. And she's saying, I choose not to talk about it. Then you said, oh, why do you choose not to talk about it? Why can't you talk about it? That is such an arrogant approach, right? All of us, none of us here would ever do that. I'm not suggesting that anybody would, but see where I'm going? You don't want to ask an ego-oriented question, which upsets the person, because then the interview is going to go into different tangent. So now you may say, I appreciate it. I will not ask you that question. However, whenever during the interview you feel free to talk about it, I'd be happy to listen. Now, she may not bring it up, but she may bring it up of her own volition. but you allow the interviewee to bring it up on her or his own terms, rather than bringing it out, rather than poking them in the eye and saying, tell me about that. Okay. IP analyzes thick meaning emotional, voluminous, descriptive data. Okay, there's a lot of data involved. Discursive accounts. What are discursive accounts? Discursive accounts are rambling accounts. Rambling doesn't mean senseless. Rambling just means when you're asking somebody to talk about their experiences, they may talk about their experiences in a somewhat non-structured, disconnected type of way, right? And you may be wanting a very coherent description, but you may not get it. They may be here today, right now, then they go jump to another topic, then they come back somewhere else. So it's how you direct the interview. You're steering the ship, not they. So good interviewing skills are very important in not only IPA, but all research methodology. It does not attempt to hypothesize, validate, refute, define, taxonomize, or theorize. Let me talk about this now. So the attempt in IPA, and especially in phenomenology, IPA is a phenomenological approach, right? It's interpretive phenomenological analysis. So the attempt is not to you do not use hypothesis in IPA or phenomenology ever. There is no place for hypothesis or hypotheticals. You do not validate. Oh, so you say that like you validate in quant, right? You're supporting, right? You're validating, meaning agreeing with what was found through your observations, through the respondents' data. But there is no such thing as validation in the case of phenomenology and most qualitative research. You're not trying to validate. You're not validating, replicating, etc., refuting. No, this is not the way it is. You don't challenge that. You don't define. You don't ask somebody to define what abuse means to them. You can ask them, how did they make sense of abuse? Can you tell me a bit about how you feel about abuse? But you don't say, can you give me a definition of abuse? You do not taxonomize. You do not list an order of preference. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the 4 factors that are affecting abuse. Do you agree or don't you agree? That's a quantitative approach. So you do not put order to something. There is no order in. This is the thing about qualitative research. Can be very unstructured. It can be very unstructured, but it's not necessarily unscientific. Okay. So you do not theorize. Very, very important thing. Everybody that's doing research of any way, kind or way, will always support their findings with theories. That's okay. When you get to the findings, after you interpret the data, make sense of the data, you can support your data, connect your data with your literature review and all of that kind of good stuff, with citations, with theoretical frameworks. But you don't start your study with a theoretical framework in mind. You don't start a study thinking, oh, I'm going to use the gravitational theory or Archimedes' principles or Newton's principles. I'm just giving you outlandish examples. Any theoretical construct or the theory of dialectical tension. Oh gosh, no. You're starting with a pre-theoretical understanding of something. Before the theoretical reasoning or rationale was applied to it, what was that phenomena like? The phenomena in its virgin form, the phenomena in its most ordinary form, which most people would just miss. So I'll give you an example. So you're walking down those of you that like to go for a walk, if you're going in a nice natural trail, or I know in places like in most of the cities now, all the nature trails are vanishing. But if you go to the down south, you still have to see a lot of greenery, or you go to the northern hills, you have a lot of lovely nature trails and all of that. And I'm sure there in all cities have trying to create parks and gardens. So if you like to go there, and you might be walking and you might be listening to the birds chirping, especially if you go early in the morning, because the birds disappear after like 6:30, 5:30, 6:30. So you have to really catch, if you want to really be with nature, you have to, right, Ajanta? To be with nature, you have to go really early, right? Be the early bird there. So if you're going there and you're listening to all this chirping and you're listening to the sounds and sights, maybe there's a little creek flowing, the little river flowing through that, and you're listening to all that, you may have some formulations, you may have some thoughts in your mind about whatever form. So your phenomena that you're looking at is nature at its quietest. It may be a phenomenon. So if you're a keen observer, you'll observe everything that's happening around and try to make sense of it without putting a theory on that. Oh, so today the birds are here because it was cooler this morning. Yeah, that may be true, because sometimes birds, if they're it's very hot, the birds are going to fly away. Usually they come in the morning, early morning, sit on the trees because it's cool and it's quiet, so they can chirp, they can do their own thing. But if you start putting a theoretical construct around it and start to make reasoning and establish causality, establish a rationale for why they are there, you're not doing phenomenology. You're doing something else. And there is other forms of research where you use theory or theoretical constructs to frame a question, but certainly not in the form of IPA and phenomenological approach. So why pursue IPA? IPA is all about direct lived experience. It is about understanding the very essence of the experience as it reveals itself in its most primordial. Primordial is an expression we use: antique, old, original. When we say originary, it means original forms. These are expressions that are used in phenomenological texts. They're the vernacular, the language of phenomenology. The researcher is trying to make sense of the experience as it is narrated to her by the participants. So as you research participants, you're talking to participants, you are looking at how they are making sense of something, right? The objective is not to validate or invalidate that experience. That would be more the domain of quantitative research. It is not to, you're not after facticity, meaning you're not after factual data. So I don't think you're telling me the truth. It doesn't sound right, according to me. No, that is not your job. Whatever they are sharing, whether it's you think it's the truth or falsehood, it is their reality. And you have no excuse to delve into that and start to put judgmental spins on that. You are meeting them exactly on their own turf, in their own terms. They are not meeting you. Yes, you're having a meeting together, whether it's face-to-face meeting or virtual meeting or whatever. But you have to always allow them to be on their own terms if you want the best data to come out.
Anil, I have a question here.
Yes, ma'am. Tell me.
Okay, yeah. So Anil, basically, as you're saying that in qualitative, in this particular kind of IPA, what you do is you do not analyze. I mean, you don't validate. I mean, you don't try to, get into any kind of hypothesis or whatever. So is it that you get the data, you collect the data, and then you try and get whatever insights you're getting from the data, and those insights can be given to the client. Like, for example, maybe Mr. Siddharth Arora wanting to find out a problem, and that is how you just give it without any kind of You
I
know,
was just
kind of structure.
coming to the next screen.
Okay.
So you are absolutely right. What do we
Okay.
do with the data? Whatever the data we are collecting, we are just not
Right.
going to put it in a tank. We are going to make
Right.
sense of the data.
Got
We have
it.
done that. So there's a process called data collection, which is the interviewing process. And there's a process called data analysis, which uses a framework, uses a methodology how to go about disseminating, deconstructing, making sense of the data. So it is remember one thing in IPA, we are talking about retrospective accounts, past experiences. You never ask a person in phenomenological studies or in IPA, tell me your experience I will never ask you, tell me your experience in the here and now. What are you experiencing right now? That is not the goal. You're asking them to reflect on an experience that happened last year, 4 months ago, 10 months ago, 10 years ago, as a child, whatever the case may be. You're asking for retrospective. You're asking them to recount the past experience.
So it is something
Not,
like a cognitive interview that we usually do, while we are actually practicing qualitative research.
say that again.
Cognitive interviews.
Cognitive.
Just
Okay.
imagine.
Cognitive necessarily means that, yes, of course, you're going to use cognition, but just remember, along with cognition, we are using a lot of emotion.
Correct.
In qualitative work, we use a lot of emotion and cognition, thoughts and feelings. Like in quantitative, you may ask a question, send it in a questionnaire to somebody. What are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? That's really not understanding the feeling. What a numeric, that is a numeric ranking they put it on that. But when you're talking to somebody, tell me a little bit more about the feeling. What did you feel? So let's ask Ranjita. If I were to ask Ranjita, yesterday when you were attending the workshop, what feelings were you having?
Okay, like I learned like some of the basic concepts regarding this qualitative research. Some things I knew, but some things like some terms and all were new for me, which I learned yesterday from the workshop.
Okay, you are telling me what you learned, but you didn't hear my question. My question
How
was,
did
what
you
were you
feel? How did
feeling?
I
What were
feel?
you
How did I
feeling?
feel?
What were you
Yeah,
feeling as you were going through? What were you feeling yesterday?
yeah. I was feeling okay. I don't know what to use. What is the right term to use for that?
Don't worry about the right or wrong term. Just tell me what the feeling was.
It was nice attending the session like yesterday.
No, that is very sterile.
It was great.
So you see where
Okay.
I'm going with this?
Yeah.
How difficult it is when I ask somebody for a feeling, they tell me what they learned. Everything they will tell me to avoid getting in touch with the feeling. Feelings are the most difficult thing to get in touch with, right? So let's take another example, okay? Of Kiran, if I were to ask you yesterday as you were attending the session, what is it that you were feeling?
I'll say my feelings rather it changed over the course of the session. Maybe I went in feeling a little unaware of what to expect or what might happen. But at the end of it, I felt, I'm not sure of the right word, but I felt relieved to get to know that maybe I'm not completely naive in the subject, that I do know some things, but I also felt like there is a lot more I should be doing.
So you felt you were befuddled in the beginning, not wondering whether you're in the right place, is this the right thing?
Yeah.
What am I doing here? Kind of like, right?
Yeah.
We all have those feelings. And
Yeah.
as the dots start to connect, as it's kind of like, when you're in with nature, you first dip your foot in water just to feel the water,
Feel.
to see
Yeah.
how your toes feel as touching the water. And then as you feel that the water is nice and cool, you actually put your feet in further.
Put in. Yeah.
You immersed. And that also manifested in the way you were interacting, in the way you were very quiet in the beginning. And then you were interacting more. You were asking questions, you were observing. So the issue here is you will be asking in IPA and in phenomenological studies, asking interviewees a lot about their feelings and emotions. And sometimes if you are not comfortable with your own feelings and emotions deep down, it becomes that much harder to connect with somebody else's feelings and emotions. Right, Nupur? Would you agree, Nupur?
Yes, I would. I am a little perplexed. I actually use so much of finance and econometrics, so I don't actually conduct my studies having respondents or participants. So I'm just trying to, uh, see how will I actually conduct an IPA study, maybe in finance or economics.
Yes.
Behavioral finance is the behavioral finance. I think it is a
behavior, exactly. Who said that? Behavioral finance. Yeah, that's a huge field in this qualitative research is conducted a lot.
Yeah, I actually don't do my research in behavioral finance. I do it in asset pricing and market microstructure.
Okay.
So I don't have respondents.
Good. So the point I was trying to illuminate here is how difficult it can be. When I say difficult, I don't mean that it's difficult in that sense. It's the challenge is to connect with what you're feeling in the moment. And that is the same challenge you're going to have as an interviewer when you're asking somebody to connect to their feelings, because they might ask you, so what do you mean? I don't understand, Nupur, what you're asking me. And you're saying, you're asking the person, how did you feel about such and such thing? And they're describing to you. They're giving you a string of rationalization descriptions. Descriptions are not feelings. Feelings are very special, right, Siddharth?
Yes.
So Siddharth, what were you feeling yesterday?
So quite similar to what Kiran mentioned. I was feeling a bit anxious.
Okay.
To begin with, in terms of I absolutely no understanding, a feeling of, look, this is a big vacuum. I have zero clue about the subject. And the feeling changed over the course of the session, where I felt a little more confident about learning a few concepts, and I could relate to some of those concepts that I had applied or I had executed in my practical field. And towards the end of the session, I felt I would say a bit happy and excited to look forward to the next session.
See how our feelings change from feeling puzzled, confused. Do I really know? Do I don't know? Am I going to look stupid? Am I going to, what am I going to do with this? 2 hours, 2 ghante kaise beetenge? We all have that. Myself included. And believe me, if you're doing a 90-minute interview, Siddharth, with your participant, they're going to have the same type of feeling. What am I doing? What is Siddharth asking me? I don't know. What are you saying?
Anil, I have a quick question that I wanted to
go ahead.
I don't know whether you will be covering it in your session or not, but looks like there is a big responsibility in qualitative research and a big role that is played in the data collection process itself. which is the interviewing process itself, where it looks like one has to be absolutely possibly detached or neutral to the subject, and has to articulate questions in a manner which is not leading in any way. So that's a tough ask compared to, let's say, a quantitative researcher. I have absolutely no idea about quantitative research as well, but as a financial analyst, I understand that it is more numerical and it can be more clinical, so to say.
Siddharth, I love you, my friend, but I will tell you, but I have to respectfully disagree with you here, as much as I love you, because the goal in qualitative is not to be the detached observer. You're going to engage, you're going to get your hands dirtied. Both hands and feet and face dirtied.
Sir, then in that case, how do
Yes.
you then, if I get your point of view, that you have to be engaged.
Yeah.
And you can be detached and engaged at the same time. When I say detached, I really, what I mean is one can possibly, so you don't want to lead a study in a certain way. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. You're on the right track. You're on the right
Can
track.
I add to that? Is it like asking whether feeling detached, meaning you don't want to either agree or disagree?
Who's
like
this, by the way?
Or this is Kiran.
Oh, Kiran. Okay. Yeah. So you're absolutely
to remain
right.
Neutral as in, yeah.
Okay, so you remain objective, knowing fully well that the experience that you're having is subjective. Are ye kya bol rahe ho?
Yeah.
How can I remain objective and subjective at the same time? But that is a brilliant question that you asked, Siddharth. Brilliant, I'll tell you. Because what you've really gone down is to the roots of this. Phenomenological and qualitative interviewing asks of the researcher to maintain and I'm going to come to that, to maintain a paradoxically bilateral stance, where you are impacting the research or impacting the interview and are being impacted by the interview. How then do you remain objective? Knowing fully well that you're dealing with emotions, come on, you're dealing with emotions, thoughts, feelings, attitudes, a lot of stuff. It's a whole ball of wax. How can you not get entangled in somebody's stories? How can you not have an opinion, Ajanta? How can you not have an opinion? You are an experienced researcher. You're going to have an opinion, right? You're going to want to share.
So I'll just add something to this, Anil. So
yes.
Basically, that what we usually do is, as you rightly pointed out, we have to be absolutely unbiased, absolutely neutral, and not put any kind of prompts or any facial or non-verbal expressions to make the respondent or make the participant feel that I'm supporting or not supporting. That is what we've been doing. And at the same time, you need to be absolutely empathetic. You need to be absolutely empathetic, trying to give the person some kind of a feeling through your body language, through your tone, your modulation, that you are with the person. And
That's
silence,
right.
I guess, is a beautiful tool. Do not interrupt. Allow the person to go on and on.
ऐसा नहीं कि क्वेश्चन पूछ के आप ऐसे हाथ करके बैठे हाँ भी बताओ भाई that you're like a statue there कि statue की तरह आप बैठे हो कि ना आपकी आंखें हिल रही हैं ना आपका फेस हिल रहा है, you're not smiling, you're doing that. You have to show them that you're with them.
Absolutely.
So you have to be empathic, but you have to also understand कि भाई आपका objective क्या है. Your objective was there to collect rich, evocative, thick data that you can then bring back and analyze and make sense of through their stories, through their narratives. If you remain too subjective, you will lose the focus. If you remain too objective, you will become dry like a toast. You have to remain moist. When I say moist, warm, right? You have to create the warmth, but you don't have to create too much empathy. If somebody's saying, I'm just giving an example, that you know, I was sexually manipulated in my earlier years. Then you don't say, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Or somebody saying, you know, I was really sad upon the death of my father. I can understand how you feel. You don't understand how the person is feeling. How can you profess to have an understanding of how somebody is feeling? You're not in their mind. Yes, you can say, when somebody says, you can say, I'm sorry to hear that. My condolences. And then you move. You don't join them in that. Like, this is some naive researchers think that if they join that person where person is and show too much empathy, you're going to get better results. No, somebody can get really, pardon the expression, pissed off with you. They'll say, how does this person who doesn't even know me, I'm meeting this person for the first time, I'm sharing their experience. Oh, I know exactly how you mean. अपने को मालूम है क्या होता है. So you have to remain very tactful. A good conversation is where you, the researcher, is actually talking only 20 to 30% of the time. And that 60 to 70% of the time of the interview is taken up by the participants' accounts. If it is reversed, this is just a terrible interview. The participant is not researching you, you're researching participants' accounts. So about that. So I want to go, before I move on, I know that some of you have not really spoken at all here. So I'll go to Shivu just to check in with Shivu, how Shivu is doing. Shivu, how are you holding up?
So just to say that the team I have with me, they're the moderators. They're the ones actually doing these interviews at our organization. They have a bit of a language barrier, which is why they're shy, but they understand English. I don't mind them speaking in Kannada, and I can translate if that's helpful.
Yeah, go, please speak in Kannada, and you can translate, Kiran, for us.
Sure.
Go ahead, Shivu.
ಹೇಳಿ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್.
ಶಿವಮ್ಮ ಹೇಳಿ, ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಏನ್ ಅನ್ಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ? ಅದ್ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ, ಯಾರು ಮಾತಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲ ಇಷ್ಟವರೆಗೆ. ಸೊ
ನಂಗೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗ್ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಹೊಸದಾಗಿ ತಿಳ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಮೊನ್ನೆ ಇದು FGD ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇದಾಯ್ತಲ್ಲ, ನಮ್ಗೆ ಆ ಚಾಲೆಂಜಸ್ ನ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಫೇಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬರ್ತೇನಂತ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಮೇಡಮ್.
Okay. So she's saying that the workshop has been, she's learning a lot of new things. Some of the terms are a little complex for her, but she's like willing to go back and learn through it.
Wonderful.
And I had mentioned yesterday that we were having trouble with the recent qualitative study where we're examining people's opinions on yoga for healthy aging. So in this case, we went in with a more it was a focus group discussion, but we realized it was more structured than we wanted it to be. And there was that co-creation of knowledge wasn't there, what we were talking about yesterday. We weren't learning too many new things. So we had to redo the whole part of the study. So she was explaining that she is learning how not to repeat that kind of a mistake again.
Wonderful. You're a good learner. Clap, clap, clap. Shivu, thank you so much for saying that.
Thank you.
Right. I know a couple of Kannada words like Bangara and all. But by the way, what does Bangara means? Little boy?
I haven't actually heard that before. Kannadalli enadru idea atara Shivamma? Bangara anta?
Bangara.
Bangara anta?
Maybe
it's a different Bangara. Bangara literally translates to gold. It literally translates to gold, but then it's a term of endearment that you call children usually.
That's what I said for you. I used to have a colleague who used to call her son Bangara or something like
Bangara.
Gold. Okay, now I know.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much, Shivu, and thank you to our translator. Kiran, for helping us
You're welcome.
understand such rich thoughts. I'm so glad that you could be that has been helpful to you.
Yeah.
And also, I want to just check in with Fazila. Fazila has not spoken at all.
Hi, sir.
Fazila, how are you doing in
Hello,
the
ma'am.
lecture?
Hello.
Hey,
Yes, go
hello
ahead.
Fazila, tell us how you're feeling. ಹೇಳಿ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಂದ್ರೆ ಹೇಳಿ.
ಮುಜೆ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ಅದೇ ನನಗೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನ್ಯೂ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಂಗಾಯ್ತು ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಇಂದ. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅದೇ ಅವರು ಸರ್ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ರು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಇವಾಗ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ 20 to 30% ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ನಾನು ತುಂಬಾ ಅವರೇ 60 to 70% ಅವ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಕು, ನಾವು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ.
ಹೌದು.
ಅದು ನಾನು ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡೆ, ಅಯ್ಯೋ ನಾನು ತುಂಬಾ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನೇನೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ಅದು ಐಡಿಯಾ ಎಜ್ಜಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ. ಅದು ಕಲ್ತ್ಕೊಂಡೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಫಿನಾಮಿನಾ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಟ್ರಲ್ಲ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್, ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಟಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ ಅಳವಡಿಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಅವರು ನಾವೇನ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಚಾಲೆಂಜಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಅದನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬಹುದು, ಏನ್ ತಿಳ್ಕೋಬಹುದು ಅನ್ನೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಈ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಇಂದ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು. ಮತ್ತೆ ನ್ಯೂ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು ಮ್ಯಾಮ್. ಇಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷ ನಾವು ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ಆದ್ರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ತಪ್ಪಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಇದಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ. ಅದು ಈ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಇಂದ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತು ನನ್ಗೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಂದೆ ನಾವು ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟೇಟಿವ್ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ, ಈ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಕಲ್ತಿದ್ವಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಅಳವಡಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್. ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್. ಸರ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್.
She first says that she really likes your presentations and she's learning a lot through it. So they've been doing, they've conducted many qualitative studies even before I joined the organization. So they were saying that you actually brought up a lot of the challenges they have faced. And one especially that Fazila finds difficult is she has to restrain herself from speaking more than the participants. So she was saying that you mentioned speaking 20 to 30%, allowing the participants to speak for 60 to 70%. That's one of the biggest challenges she finds, she was saying. And she wants to know how we can, while we're doing qualitative studies, we want to improve the quality of the data we're getting. So she wants to know how we'll be able to.
The quality of the data would come from the quality of the interviewing. And the quality of the interviewing boils down to the kind of questions you're going to ask, your interview schedule, and then also in the interview schedule, what kind of prompts you have. So you ask a question, Kiran, it's such and such, and the person says, I don't know, can you rephrase that question? And then you ask the question in a different way, right? And or if the person is stumbling somewhere, you may prompt that person to unstumble, to make sense of what you were asking them. So it's an art more than a science, right? So if you ask good, solid, robust questions, you're going to get a solid response. So Kiran, I know that it comes like a very simplistic answer, and it probably is, because there's a lot of nuance involved in this. So I'd be very happy to be we provide any feedback, any help that you guys need in your studies and all that. And after the seminars and all that, if you want to seek out my help for something, I'd be very happy to help you out. This is something that I live
that's
in.
Something we were thinking about. That's something we were thinking about, given none of us are really formally trained in qualitative studies. But we're learning as we go.
No, and I'll be very happy to serve as a external consultant or an external methodologist or whatever on your team, and to help you out as much as I can, because this is something I've been doing for a long time. Anyway, let's move forward. Okay, just one second. So the theoretical, and just one second. Okay, the theoretical underpinnings, and I'll go really quickly about this. I'm not going to dwell too much time on theory, but you have to understand that it rests on 3 pillars. I'm talking about IPA, guys. Interpretive phenomenological analysis, the approach for doing data analysis, rests on 3 theoretical pillars. What are they? Number 1, phenomenology, as you must have guessed, right? One of the biggest pillars is phenomenology, understanding the essence of a phenomenon. From the first person point of view, what do we mean by that? In phenomenological studies, unlike other qualitative studies and unlike other, especially quantitative studies, where the use of the third person is used. The researcher did this, the researcher did that, the researcher took this, the researcher looked at the data. In qualitative studies, especially phenomenology, where the researcher's role is extremely important, you start with saying, I did this. I recruited 15 participants. I asked them these questions. Now, I'm not saying that first person, I is first person, right? So I'm not saying that first person is going to be used throughout, but you make extensive use of the first person because the reader of the study, the person who's looking at the study, wants to know what it is that you did, not what it is that researcher did, even though researcher and you are the same person. Right, Ranjita? So if your study comes to me as a phenomenological study from ISAC, and you're using all third person, the researcher did this, researcher did this, I'm going to come after you. I'm going to say, hey, Ranjita, kuch nahi seekha?
Yes.
You didn't learn anything from this. Huh? So you have to use I, especially when you're writing the introduction section, chapter 1, you use I a lot. Then chapter 2 is literature review, which is more third person because you're citing the work of other authors. Then chapter 3, methodology, will have a bit of both, I and them. Then chapter 4, data analysis, is full of I. Siddharth, you with us? So the first person account is very, very important in qualitative research and especially in phenomenology. So it is about intentionality. What is the study directed toward? What is the phenomena that you're researching? Major theorists are Husserl, Heidegger, Sartre, and Schutz. There are 35 other philosophers. I'm not naming all of them, but major ones are Merleau-Ponty, Husserl, Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, a French phenomenologist. Okay, also his lifelong partner, even though they were never married, they were lovers throughout the rest of their lives in France, was Simone de Beauvoir. You must have heard Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre had this lifelong academic relationship, and also they were very, very close, very intimate partners, but they never got married. Hermeneutics is the second pillar, interpretation of text. Hermeneutics is nothing but interpretation. Interpretation can be written, verbal, and non-verbal. Philosophers in that, Gadamer, Ricoeur, Delphi, etc. Ideography is the third pillar. Understanding an individual's retrospective account. Remember, we were talking about in the previous slide that it is a retrospective account, retrospective experience, meaning experience that is already past. I'm not asking VM, how are you doing right now? What is your experience that you're having right now? Now you might say, why not? Isn't the here and now important? Those of you that are familiar with ISABS, Indian Society for Applied Behavioral Sciences, they run labs, basic process labs, advanced labs, etc. They focus on the here and now, what is happening to you as you sit there. But for the purpose of research, even if I were to ask you, VM, can you tell me about this experience in the here and now? The moment you start telling me about that experience in the here and now, that experience is already passed into it has become the past. Because now you're reflecting on what? You're reflecting on the experience, even though you're telling me in the experience in the here and now, right now, you're reflecting on it in a past tense. Oh, as I think about this, because what happens is that present moment is is very fleeting. It's very ephemeral. It is only there for a split second. The moment you start talking about that, it has already gone into the past. Has it not? So that's why they say capturing that exact present moment is an endeavor in impossibility. It's very, very difficult. So just remember, ideography is understanding an individual's retrospective account on their own terms. So when you're guiding the interview, you're steering the interview, remember, you're only doing it gently, tactfully, remaining both subjective and objective. But most important in the data is their account, not what you want to say about it. Right? So every individual, when I say every individual, every participant is a separate entity by himself or herself. So you don't say, oh, I'm doing this study on yoga, like Kiran was saying, that study on yoga, right? Okay, so you may have 20 participants for the study. All 20 are important. But when you are, Kiran, interviewing every participant, each participant, you are totally focused on the life story, on the narrative, on the lived experience of that person. You are not thinking about the entire study. Very, very critical. Because if you start thinking about, oh, I'm interviewing Suman, but Raju said this to me yesterday, so I don't agree, because Raju was saying something about yoga differently from you. If your thoughts are going to Raju while you're interviewing Suman, you are not doing justice to the interview that you're having with Suman. And this is one of the reasons, Kiran, why interviews tend to not yield good data. We get so consumed with the entire study that we lose focus on that individual who's sitting there with you. And by the way, it's also just common sense that when you, for instance, when you're talking to somebody, right, you want to be present, fully present with that person, correct? You want to make sure that you're giving that person the full attention, the full respect, the full reverence, the full empathy that the person deserves, without faltering and without going here and there and back and forth, thinking your thoughts are running here and there, or you have your own biases. You have to listen to their accounts, exactly what they're telling you, and then come back to the office, and then we can make sense of that. All right, enough said about that. So in every individual is a separate entity. These are some very important aspects of qualitative research. And again, some methodologies may use a slightly different approach, others may use a different approach, but basically, this is what qualitative research really is. Now, how is IPA different from other methods? It is a turnkey method. It's a step-by-step method. I'm showing you now of sorting through. Remember we said, Ajanta said, oh, so we bring all of this data. How do we analyze the data? How do we make sense of the data? So it is a process of sorting through and analyzing qualitative data using techniques of phenomenological reduction. I'll talk about that in a second. It is especially useful for novice researchers that are just starting out. And that's not to suggest that intermediate and advanced users are not going to do well with IPA. But when you enter research, when you're wet behind the ears and you're doing qualitative researches, you need a step-by-step approach. So that, okay, so if I bring the data, I can do the interviews, I can bring the interviews back. Now what do I do? Anil, with the interviews. How do I go about analyzing the data? How do I go about making sense of the data? So you have to have a structure, right? It's especially ideographic focuses on how an individual in a specific context makes sense of a specific phenomenon. I just talked about ideography. Double, triple hermeneutic. It's very important in IPA to understand that you're making sense of somebody's experience of a phenomenon. You're making sense of somebody's experience of a phenomena. Who's that somebody? Your participant. You're looking at the participant's experience through your own lens. Correct? Kabhi Ajanta, tell me about that emotional abuse, or tell me about whatever. Ajanta is telling me about her experiences with abuse or whatever. And I'm looking at her experiences through my own lens. But when Ajanta is narrating those experiences, Ajanta is looking at those experiences through her own lens. Let me spend a moment here. This is a very interesting, but also can be a complex concept. So let me give you an example. Okay. So let us say this is the phenomena. I'm just going to use my iPod case. So this is the phenomena that we're looking at, right? And I have Ajanta that I'm interviewing. And I'm asking Ajanta, can you tell me about this phenomena? Can you share? And I'm asking her questions, and Ajanta is talking to me about that phenomena, whatever the phenomena is. Unwed mother, emotional abuse, employee engagement, whatever. It can be like 1,000 different phenomena. So when Ajanta is telling me about the phenomena, in a manner of speaking, I'm a bit removed from that phenomena, as I have to be, because I have to keep my biases, assumptions aside about that phenomenon. I want to listen to Ajanta's own personal accounts of that phenomenon. So when Ajanta talks about that phenomena, she's throwing light on the phenomena, looking at the phenomena through her own lens, through her own eyes. And I'm making sense of what she is making sense of, using my own lens. So the phenomena is here, Ajanta's here, and I'm here as the researcher. So there is a double layer through which the phenomena is being filtered, the narrative is being filtered. Correct? So when we say double hermeneutic, we mean in IPA studies, the researcher is making sense of a participant. You're making sense of a participant. I'm making sense of you making sense of the phenomenon. Ajanta. I am the researcher. I'm making sense of how you are making sense of the phenomenon. Why? Because through your stories and narratives, I'm going to understand that phenomena better, because I'm trying to understand the phenomena through your eyes. So remember that because of these multi-layers, and if we introduce the reader, now there is another complexity there. The reader of my study, so let's say I complete the study, Ajanta, and I create an article from there, right, in which I've written about the study that we conducted. The reader that is reading it, reading my study, is making sense of how I'm making sense of Ajanta, how Ajanta is making sense of the phenomenon. And then we call it a triple hermeneutic. Hermeneutic is just nothing but interpretation. Double interpretation, triple interpretation. Got it? Okay. You don't have to become experts at this. By the way, as you do more of this, as you engage more of this, as you read more about this, you will understand what I'm talking about. So it uses small corpuses, usually 6 to 7 participants, but for longer studies, you use about at least 10, 15 participants. So if you're like Kiran was doing it, a qualitative study on yoga, or if somebody else is doing a qualitative study on health sciences, something like that. You would use typically 10 to 12 participants who are recruited as a purposive sample. Purposive meaning it's a sample with a purpose, not just random sample. These are recruited because these folks all can give me direct lived experience or share with me direct lived experience of the phenomenon. Of what changes, like for instance, I'm going back to Kiran's point about yoga and wellness, right? Or yoga and emotional wellness, or physical wellness, or tranquility, or serendipity in life, or whatever the case may be. So I would recruit participants, who are practitioners of yoga. It doesn't matter whether new students or if I want to have advanced, then I have to have advanced students of yoga. Otherwise, if that is not one of the criteria, I can even have some advanced, some novices just starting out, some others who are advanced, and some others who are intermediate yoga practitioners. So emphasis on the co-creation of understanding. It is not that you're getting all of this stuff and you're taking it back, processing it, and putting together a package using the words of the interviewee or the participant. You're co-creating this research. That's what makes it beautiful. That's the magic. And how do you co-create? If you've picked up nothing else, you've probably understood how you're engaging with the participants. You're asking them probing questions. You're asking them to reflect on their experiences. How do they feel about the experience? How do they make sense? How do they make meaning of the experiences? You're playing an active role in the semi-structured in-depth interview, but you're also sometimes standing back and just listening to them. So it's back and forth, back and forth. And the researcher assumes a hands-on, I mean, you're not hands-off like in quantitative studies. Quantitative studies, the researcher is hands-off. Qualitative studies, you're hands-on. You're using a hands-on, paradoxically bilateral, means you're affected by and you're affecting the interview process. Because it is what? It is intersubjective. You're in that relationship with the participant. Interpretation and sense making have already begun in the data collection phase. So as you're collecting data, you're already making sense of the data that is coming out, but you are yet staying back and not immersing in the data right now. Because why? You don't want to put your own biases into the data. Okay.
A quick question again, just
go ahead.
on the previous on the slide.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, it's a tough ask to co-create and remain active, and at the same time, you're neutral. I'm just thinking, how does that practically play out? Okay,
so that is one of the most challenging things, and that is one of the reasons why people, some of them who get into qualitative studies, are not comfortable doing qualitative studies, because they're either too objective or they become too subjective. They don't know how to do this dance. It's a leela, as they say, dance. Like Ram Leela, you heard of the expression Ram Leela, right? A dance. This is the dance between the researcher and the participant.
In fact, I just wanted to add something, Anil.
Yeah.
I think coming back to Siddharth's question, See,
Yes.
it's maintaining a balance between, everything, like whether you're supporting or not supporting your body language, your, the kind of empathy, the kind of silence. At the same time, you're actually multitasking, because you should have the research objective in mind, and you should have different ways of asking, different ways of probing. And ultimately, at the end of one interview, you would have clients. We would have clients like you, Siddharth, who would be actually watching what's happening, because we are doing it online. So, answering the questions of clients like Kiran and you, and making sure that we have the answers. So at the end of the day, it's absolutely a Leela, and you really have to be on your toes, and you have to mindfully do what you're doing, maintaining an absolute balance.
So you summed it up so beautifully, so eloquently. A hand of applause to you for an amazing thought there, because what you just said, you may not have realized what you really just said. You captured the entire essence in a few words. First thing you said, if everybody heard you, and I think everybody did, that even though you are doing all of this interviewing, one part of you is totally engaged with the participant, right? Because you're listening to the accounts, you're asking questions, you're asking prompts and all that. But you're remaining mindful of your research objective. Are you asking them, if you're doing a study on emotional abuse, are you talking about cricket with your participant? No. You're talking, all of your data is being collected around emotional abuse. So your questions have to be directed to the research. And what Ajanta said as the research topic can be loosely also called the research phenomena. Although the topic and phenomena is a little bit different, but for the sake of this discussion, let's keep them the same. What she said was enormous. If you lose sight of your research phenomena, you may as well just forget it. All your time will be wasted. All the data that you collect is going to be garbage. I am sorry to say that. Some researchers, especially the newer researchers who are a little wet behind the ears, they get so overzealous. First of all, I think, oh my God, I got the interview. My God. They're so excited about getting the interview that they forget that the interview is around the research phenomena. Interview is not around some other topic. It's not about Hollywood and Bollywood and Amitabh Bachchan's roles. And yes, the participant may start talking about Amitabh Bachchan or Jaya Bhadri or whatever, some of the newer, Priyanka Chopra. But then if the interviewee participant is talking so much about Priyanka Chopra and Bollywood and all that, how do you steer the person back to your phenomena that you're researching? Anybody?
I don't think you have any shortcut for that, or you have any better method. You have to,
what would you do? Oftentimes it happens, by the way. It's happened to me, it's happened to everybody. They start talking about something quite different.
Yeah. You have to interrupt and probably subtly convey that, what you're trying to ask.
How will you do it? I want to ask, how will you do it, VM? Subtle to kya, subtlety tab tak nahi chalta. Sometimes they get that feel, if you're too subtle too quickly, they'll think you're being rude.
Is it by probing a little bit?
How would
bring
you
it
probe?
back to
Ranjita,
bring it back to
So that we can just focus on the main topic.
Okay, so give me an example. So now you are
How does
interviewing me,
this-
and I'm so besotted by Priyanka Chopra that I'm talking, oh, I saw this film of hers, I saw this film, and she just, her marriage with Jonas Brothers, one of the brothers, and blah, 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 and I'm going on and on about that. अरे आपने भी तो उनकी picture देखी होगी, कितनी बढ़िया picture है रंजीता. How would you bring me back to the phenomenon? Tell me.
No. I think it would have.
I'm asking Ranjita.
Sorry.
Yeah, just 1 second. Ranjita, what would you do?
Maybe we will maybe we will just try to like take their attention to the topic by like probing or something like that, like
How?
so
Give
that
me an
they
example.
just
I'm role playing with you right now. How would you do it? By Ranjita, I'm so excited. Priyanka Chopra, my God, she really acts so well. She's doing so well, and she's doing now.
we will first of all we will
social.
just listen to him, listen to the participant what he is telling, and just
No, you
then just
say to
politely we
me.
will try to divert.
I'm your participant right now. Say to me. You listen to me. So
Okay.
I'm saying Priyanka Chopra is, oh my goodness, she's a real activist. She's doing for social causes. So it's brilliant. Not only in her acting, but also in the work that she's doing for social causes. Have you not heard of Priyanka Chopra? Ranjita, have you heard
Yes,
of Priyanka
yes.
Chopra? Yeah. How do you like her? Do you
Yes,
like
yes.
her?
Yeah.
Do you like her?
Okay.
Have
Yes.
you seen any
Yes,
of her?
you seem to
Have
be
you
a
seen
big
any of?
fan of Priyanka.
Huh?
But Anil, I think we've called you here, basically because we had to discuss the financials, what is IDBI doing? So
Right.
I know you're a big fan, Anil, even I am. So maybe,
Huh.
we can talk about it once we are done with this session, or maybe, I'll definitely invite you for another session where we discuss the celebrities. So can we just
There you
move
go.
on?
Sometimes you have to be very direct. You have to be very direct because the session is about something else. They know, participants know, but they're so excited. They're thinking, "Arey, kya to idhar chit chat session chal raha hai?" I mean, hopefully you won't get too much of this, Ranjita, but you have to say, that's nice that you enjoy. I also really like her movies. So can we do one thing? After this session, can I have a little phone call with you? And we can chat about that. But let me ask you a question. A very powerful way of getting back to the track is by saying, let me ask you a question. It's a very clever way of changing the topic. So what do you think about demonetization? Right? And then you're bringing me back. So you were talking about demonetization. Oh, yes. So yeah. Yeah. So what was your question? Demonetization. Okay. So see how you can bring them back. It comes with tact. It comes with experience. It's not easy always, but there's no one size fits all. There is not one easy answer. But the goal is, as Ajanta said, is to remain focused on your research topic, your research phenomena, your research question. Okay. IPA deploys inductive reasoning philosophically. Like, I'm going to skip over that because I'm going to get, in the interest of time, get into the process. Bracketing, I just want to talk quickly about bracketing. We've been talking about how to remain subjective how to remain objective when you're subjective, right? How to play this dance. There is an expression that we use, technique that we use in qualitative research and especially in phenomenology called bracketing. Bracketing means whatever assumptions, attitudes, perceptions that you have, your ideas, thoughts, prejudices on a certain phenomena, you can consciously list them down and keep them aside, keep them in brackets, keep them aside for the purpose of the interview. Why? Because if you don't keep them aside, the interview becomes about you, the researcher, rather than about the participant. Because you'll start putting your thoughts into it. You're putting your own spin into it. So researchers' assumptions, preconceived notions, and paradigmatic lenses as they relate to the study phenomena are important factors. These are important things. Your paradigmatic lens, your theoretical understanding, your emotional understanding is very, very important. I'm not saying it's not important. However, for the sake of this research, in order to collect the best and the most optimal data, you have to bracket those assumptions. Keep them aside. And then there'll be a point in your study when you bring them back. But for the point of data collection, keep them aside. be mindful, as Ajanta said, that you are not leading them in the direction of your own motivation. It's very, very important not to lead them. While the researcher consciously brackets the assumptions and biases, she allows her reflexivity. You'll hear another expression called reflexivity to surface and makes careful notations about how she's impacted. So as you're bracketing your assumptions, you're going through some feelings, right? You have to be able to express what those feelings are and how those feelings, how the process of bracketing is impacting you and how it might be impacting the research. So in this way, IP is a novel and unique approach to studying phenomena. Okay, the next slide covers the interpretation and analytic process. And now, in the next 20 minutes that we have before the end time, I'm going to go through this exercise with you. And by the way, don't feel overwhelmed. If you want my PowerPoint slides on this, I'll be happy to send you. You'll be seeing all of these visuals in the YouTube recording. So you're not going to miss out on anything. So let's say you've collected the data. Okay. You did 15 interviews or 10 or 12, and you collected the data. You have this volume of data you've collected. It could be running into 250, 300 pages, mind you. It's a lot of data. Because you're asking, as the researcher, you ask them a question and the person is answered, etc., right? How do you then go about disseminating, deconstructing what is happening? So what you would do is you would identify themes and recurring patterns in the first transcript. Transcript meaning when you've done the interview, you have the interview recording, you'll create a transcript, a Word document. Okay, using the left side margin of the transcript, list all the words, phrases, ideas, and convergent patterns, keeping the study phenomena in mind. When Ajanta said the study topic, when I say study, the research topic in mind. So just look at the first transcript, keep the research topic in mind, and see what are the phrases, what are the expressions, what are some of the words, key streams of consciousness that are coming forth. List all those words in the left-hand column. This is your raw data. Closely examine the stage 2, that was stage 1. Stage 2 is closely examine your own notations in the left margin. All of these words that you put together. And look for emergent themes and patterns using specific phrases that most closely capture the essence of your phenomenon. So what you're then doing is all these words, the raw data that you had, all these streams of consciousness words, you're taking them, grouping them into some subheads. Okay. Stage 3, take a separate piece of paper and title it interview number 1 or transcript number 1. List these themes, these clubbings, these subheadings that you did from only the first transcript onto this separate piece of paper. And list this as interview 1. On the same paper, on the same interview number 1 paper, separate paper, begin clustering the themes for interview 1, making sure that you're avoiding redundancy and repetition. So you're actually looking at all of these subheads and seeing, are some of them just repetitions? And if they're repetitions, put them together under the same head. Closely examine this paper and start distilling the themes and grouping them into superordinate, most important themes. So if you notice, it's kind of like a triangle, right? You're putting a lot of words into it. When I say triangle, actually, I was meaning a funnel. You're putting all the words into it, and through each step, actually, the number of themes are becoming lesser and lesser through a process of distillation. Like when those of you that drink, you know that you have to have a lot of brew, a big bucket of brew to get this one bottle of liquor, or itra as they call it. Rose itra, Kiora itra, whatever itra, sandalwood itra. Itra is the essence. What are you really trying to do? You're trying to determine the essence of your phenomena. So then the same process that you followed, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, right? You use for the interview number 2 separately. Keep this first one aside. Let's take interview number 2, second one, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do it for each and every interview. Then taking a highlighter, right, with different color markers. You're marking on each of them the final themes that you're getting. These are the major themes that are emerging in your each interview. So you may have, let's say if we did 10 interviews, just keep it simple, 10, and you had 10 themes emerging from each interview, then 10 times 10 is 100. Are all 100 themes important? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you need to further reduce them, further distill them, put them under the same heads. So of the 100, when you go through this entire process, you may actually come up with only 40 or 30, more likely 30. Then again, you look at the 30 in the chart. In your table, you do a table. And then you might notice from the 30, actually it becomes 10. Because many of these things are repetitions of the topic, of the phenomenon. Because after all, you're interviewing people on the same topic, right? So you're bound to get some convergences, some divergences. So when you do this process, you finally come up with the superordinate themes. You may come up with 5 or 6 superordinate themes. Mind you, from so much data, such a big Siddharth, such a big funnel, you actually come up with only 4 or 5 at the end. That is what makes the process novel, but it also makes the process tedious. So if you come back to that, the 4 or 5 superordinate themes, you may then have to determine, are all 4 or 5 superordinate themes important and critical to be written about? Or out of that 4, you may need to pick 3 that are emerging in all your interviews. If all of your interviews are, and you see these superordinate themes emerging, then those superordinate themes are the themes that you want to write about. And these become your findings. Because from the themes, you will determine you interpret the findings. So phenomenological writing up is the final phase. 60 to 70% of your total task involves writing. Writing means now you're writing a report, right? You research report. Given the idiographic focus of IPA, each participant's account is treated and written about on its own merit and terms with specificity and particularity in mind. So each account is written idiographically. IPA writing is about evocative descriptions and pathos-laden narratives. Evocative descriptions, really rich. Even if it's rambling, it's rich. It evokes feelings. It evokes emotion. It's not sterile. It's pathos laden, emotionally laden. Feelings which add to its novelty and richness. Interviews are referred to as cases in IPA. You can put them as transcript, interview 1 or case 1, it doesn't really matter. In the analysis, the researcher first writes about each case and so forth. So you first write when you're writing a report, and this is that we are getting to the point of writing the report. You collected the data, you've done the interviews, you've analyzed the interviews using this previous process that I showed you. This is about writing, and writing becomes critical because you may do all of the wonderful stuff of collecting data, analyzing data, interpreting data, but if you are not able to put together the data in a coherent way and write about it intelligently, using citations, using references, using maybe at that point, you can actually start bringing in some theory from your literature review. From literature review is the second chapter. And if you're writing a research report, which is like going to be in the form of an article, you may not necessarily have to do heavy theoretical construction, but you do have to have some elements of theory there. But not in the initial. In the initial stage, it's all pre-theoretical. Remember, I told you it's all pre-theoretical, pre-reflective, pre-theoretical before it has been reflected on. That's why there's no here and now. Because that here and now, the moment I ask you to reflect, it's already moved into the past. There is no such thing as the pure here and now, present moment. The moment you start talking about the present has already gone into the past. After all the case narratives are individually written, the researcher then distills the data and creates a group narrative. So you do a group narrative, a group discussion sort of thing. And that is the end of the presentation today. And I just wanted to share with you that while it looks like a lot of information, right? This becomes a lot easier if you are able to really do this work rather than just talk about this work. So if you give me just 1 minute, I'll go to the bathroom and I'll come right back, okay? And you guys can also take a couple of minutes break and then we'll wind it up, all right? Sorry about that, I'm back. Okay, so I had a plan of doing sharing with you something about grounded theory. Unfortunately, this has taken a lot of time, and so we won't have the time to do that. But I can promise you one thing, that I'm available to discuss that with you, and to share my thoughts on that individually. If you have any questions or concerns, I'm sure all of you will have a lot of questions. And grounded theory, just so you know, in the few minutes that we have remaining, and I want to be mindful of your time, it's night for you, it's still daylight for me. Grounded theory is an approach that we use. It is also a qualitative approach. We use grounded theory when we are determining factors, causality. Why does one thing cause another? What is the reasoning? What is the rationale for behind something? We understand processes that happen in organizations. Okay, it's a very heavy duty methodology and very involved. Okay, and it's a totally different focus. All right, unlike the focus that you have in phenomenology, which is to understand the essence of an experience, understand the lived experience of people. There, you're establishing patterns. You look deeply into convergences and divergences. Okay, you establish, when you're looking at factors, what are the factors responsible for this? You're going really deep into this, and the goal in this grounded theory is to establish a new theory or a theoretical framework, or to refine an existing theoretical framework. So it could be to come out with something totally brand new. More power to you. If you are finding that there's something going on and you dig into the literature and there is nothing written about that at all, that could be a fertile opportunity for you to go and do a grounded theory study. It's an amazing opportunity because you can come up with a theoretical construct or a theoretical understanding of something, and it'll always be attached to your name as the person who came out with that theory. But I will caution you that grounded theory is a very long, very involved process. Even if you do an accelerated grounded theory study, it's still a very long study. So I would be careful before you embark on grounded theory. Grounded theory is very complex. And I'm available to help you and to understand and deconstruct the grounded theory approach. It's a very long process. It could take at least 2 whole sessions, 2 hours each, to go into the grounded theory. And maybe at some point we will look at that. But I think then also, I think it's a blessing in disguise that we didn't talk about that, because it could confuse you, because they're two, even though they're both inductive approaches, they're two distinctly separate approaches. One is pre-theoretical, pre-reflective, one is highly reflective and highly theoretical. Grounded theory is very theoretical. It's all about theory, theory, theory. You're establishing a new theory or refining an existing theory. So if I were you, spend time on, the folder that I shared with you has a number of papers on IPA. Okay, pieces on IPA. Go through those papers on IPA. Go through the IPA structure. What are some of the thoughts? What are some of the studies that have been done using IPA? Don't look at the full-length dissertations. If you want to look at the shorter articles, it would be really helpful for you. So I would do that, and I'll also look through the folder and see if there's anything else that I wanted to share that I was not able to share given the time. Because as you know, my workshops, those that have attended, I'm infamous for this, that I think that I'm going to cover a lot more, actually end up covering a little less. But I feel better about covering a little less and covering it in depth rather than covering so much and becoming a generalist. like telling you about all the theories and all the different strategies, and you come away learning nothing really about each one of them. So we take and specialize in something and try that. Most importantly, Kiran, is to try. Put that approach to practice. You're in the perfect opportunity. You're doing, Ajanta, you're in the perfect opportunity to try that approach for a study. Do a study. I'm here as if you want to seek my help with something. That's the way you will actually learn, and that you can contribute something of value to the extant literature out there. By way of articles, resources. It's a very novel approach to doing analysis and can be really beautifully used to study a lot of phenomena. So with just a few minutes, I just wanted to go over and ask a phenomenological question to all of you and to each of you to reflect in a couple of minutes. What was it like for you to attend the 2 days? What did you learn? What did you take away from this experience that we had together? Anybody can go first.
It opened a door to a completely new thing for me. And especially when you said that IPA can be done with, participants, a close group kind of participants.
Yes.
And this is something really very new for me. I have not done something like this before.
Okay.
And then I think Jagannath, right? Yeah. Hi. Thanks. Yeah. Maybe behavioral finance or something to understand the psychology of very focused group, very special kind of investors. It opens a new door for me. So it was something extremely new, and I actually look forward using it in some of my studies in the future.
Great, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Who wants to go next?
I could go next.
Yeah, go ahead, Kiran.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think the same thing. I learned a lot of new things. At the same time, I unlearned a few assumptions that I had regarding qualitative research.
Okay.
And I'm very happy that you got into IPA, particularly during this workshop, because it's something I'm planning to use. I'm not fully sure if that's the right methodology yet, but it's something I'm planning the approach yet, but I'm planning to employ that during my PhD. I've just enrolled for it.
So you enrolled for your PhD. Where have you enrolled?
Yeah, I'm
My
at JSS.
Well, here you go, a really studious nerd, as if MD was not enough for her.
But research is where my
all of you
heart
must
is,
be know. You must have already known that she's a physician, right? So
yeah, just primary care physician. So public health and research is where my heart is. So
okay,
yeah, that's what I want to work in.
So you've enrolled for a PhD where?
At JSS Academy of Higher Research in Mysore.
In Mysore, JSS. Okay, yeah. Wonderful. That is amazing. And so just so you know, I regularly, very routinely work with doctoral students, as you know.
Okay.
Helping them navigate the journey and helping them get through, then clarifying their doubts and helping them build a research framework, research design, etc. So feel free, don't hesitate to contact me if you need any of my support and help. But getting back to what did you take away from the workshop?
Yeah, so it's something about how to start from the foundational level while I build my work in this area and build my learning in this area is what I took away, especially regarding IPA, and that's something I want to look into further. Okay,
wonderful. That's great.
So thank you for that. And thank you for the group and their questions too, because I learned so much from all of their interactions too.
Without the group, I'm nobody. It's all because of you, I'm only the steward of the enterprise, but not the one who's doing the work. You guys are doing the work. So Who wants to go next?
Yeah,
Maybe I'll take it. Fall.
Yeah,
Did you
Jagannath,
want to
please
say
go
something?
ahead.
Phenomenology, I read a paper some time back, and I actually could not understand the gist of it. Basically, this individual, one of my friends has done a study, a small study, just 5 employees. So I'm heavily into quantitative research. So I could never fathom how can you do research with just 5 interviews. So, but he published a paper in a very decent journal. That is where I got this term of phenomenology, and I was very curious.
As a matter of fact, VM, glad that you mentioned that, because in IPA, the IPA authors who created IPA, Jonathan Smith, Flowers, and Larkins in UK, University of Birkbeck, they actually say you can do an IPA study with just 4 or 5 participants. Okay. Now, when you're doing a doctoral dissertation, your faculty are not going to allow you to do just 4 or 5. They want more data, right? So they're going to ask you to do at least 10 to 14. Minimum, the optimal level is 14. But I'm so glad that you found that there was another pathway for you to look at that, because especially coming from a quantitative realm. But I must commend you that even though you were coming from a quantitative realm, you did not make us feel stupid, right? You did not make me or anybody else feel inadequate, that, oh, what is this mumbo jumbo you're talking about, all this abstract stuff, right? Esoteric stuff that doesn't add up. And especially for the Kiran, like for Kiran, she's a physician, like totally very cognitive and very structured medicine. For you guys to sit through and do that was very heartwarming for me, and learn and share was great. So this is what I really call, and part of that, as Kiran said, is also about unlearning, right? Unlearning is as much as, sometimes as important as learning something, right? So thank you, VM, for your amazing questions, very poignant inquiries, which really helped us steer us in a new direction, totally. So thanks a lot for your participation, and I hope to remain in touch.
If I may ask a last question.
Yeah, sure.
See, we are into this, new in entire nation is into a new pathway called ancient Indian knowledge. So we are also part of that. So this last year we have picked up 3 texts: Bhagavad Gita, Thirukural, and Arthashastra. So there is a lot of attempts are being made to go through these texts and derive knowledge out of it. So what kind of technique do we apply for this? Like one of the dissertations one of my colleagues have done about change management, learning lessons of change management from Bhagavad Gita. So,
oh my goodness, beautiful! This is a fertile opportunity to use hermeneutics.
Okay.
Hermeneutics is the interpretation of text.
Okay.
Interpretation also, by the way, interpretation means meaning making, sense making.
Yeah.
Right. If you go believe that. So that would be a phenomenal opportunity.
So will it also fall under IPA? No.
Absolutely. IPA is a hermeneutic approach.
Okay.
IPA comes from hermeneutic phenomenology. And I'll be very happy to take it offline with you if you wanted to talk to discuss this further with me. I know you're working for the government of India, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you do for them? Just curious.
I'm in the Indian Navy.
Indian Navy.
Okay. Yeah.
Active duty.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's great.
So I was I was posted in College of Defense Management, and I was a faculty there. And I just moved out of that place, and I came to Vizag now. So there, I'm talking about all this initiatives that are being taken of that particular college. It is
even in Goa, there is a war college, right?
Yeah, that's a war college. This is a defense management college, and this is a tri-service defense management college. Yeah.
Okay.
So war colleges talk about war tactics, strategies, and operations, etc.
Wonderful.
This is typical defense management in the sense management of other aspects. There is so much more beyond the actual war to run an organization. So that is what the defense management organization deals with. It deals with typical management problems like financial management, like data analytics, HR issues, and logistics issues.
That's great. That's good. So thank you. So your contribution has been very rich. So again, I'll be very happy to bounce some ideas off of you.
Sure.
So provide you maybe some feedback on some avenues on what direction you could go in with this. But it is very personally very interesting to me because for the longest time I've had a longing to learn Sanskrit. Okay. And I just took Sanskrit when I was in the 7th grade or 8th class in school. Still remember some of the dohas and all that we did. But Sanskrit is such a beautiful, beautiful language. I think I'm seeing the resurgence of Sanskrit coming back now.
Very much.
At least
a lot of emphasis by the government. Yeah.
By the government, there's a lot of initiative. Did you know that the most scholars of Sanskrit, teaching scholars of Sanskrit, are not in India, they're in Germany?
Yeah, I know.
In Germany, every other school, university, has Sanskrit as a language that they're teaching.
Yeah.
Because I think some Germanic expressions and German words are derived from Sanskrit.
Maybe, yeah.
So wonderful. Thank you so much, VM. Anybody? Thanks. Who wants to go next? Just real quick. I want to be mindful of your time also.
I'll go after Ajanta because I think Ajanta wanted to say something, right?
Okay, go ahead, Ajanta.
That's perfect, Siddharth. Go ahead, please. We haven't heard much of you, Siddharth, so please.
No, thank you, Ajanta. So I think firstly, this has been illuminating in more ways than one for me. So as a financial research analyst, we never looked at qualitative research the way it should be looked upon, if you ask me. So I think you've really lit that bulb, if I can say, as a financial research person, but even as an individual, as I'm Anil, I mentioned to you also of that I'm looking at a doctoral program, and I also have
Siddharth, I forget, where are you located in the US?
Sir, I'm in New York State.
Oh,
I'm in upstate New York. I'm in upstate New York.
Oh, upstate New York. Okay. And so you're looking at closely at a doctoral program?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Please
so I have an
reach out to me. I do this work all the time. Okay.
Absolutely.
In helping people scout out these programs.
Yes, absolutely. So there are ideas that I have based on, I have some thoughts already also in terms of what I want to do. And I think I was all the time relating to the qualitative research aspect and how that can be used in the research. So this has been absolutely, I would say, it has lit a lot of new bulbs.
Okay.
But I just have a feeling that you just kind of touch the surface. There's so much. I was actually going through some of the research papers also broadly. And I was like, there is so much.
We have barely, in the 2 days, we have barely scratched the surface, guys. It's just scratched. There is a whole ocean within the qualitative realm, ocean.
Yeah, but this has not been overwhelming at the same time. I was thinking it might be. You made it very simple. The participants were, everybody kind of contributed in the discussion. So it didn't really feel like overwhelming at all. I think it went very quick. So thank you very much. Just a request, maybe if there is a elementary or a basic book on qualitative research that you want to suggest, maybe on email to all of us, that would also be very useful.
अरे भैया वो book is in the folder तो देखिए तो सही आप उसमें क्या क्या चीजें दी हैं हमने
okay
सारा gold mine है folder के अंदर जैसे कहते हैं वो कन्नड़ word बंगारा gold is in the gold is in the folder में तो जाइए एक कार्ला लिख लीजिए name Carla Willig. There's a qualitative research methods and something by Carla Willig. Open that book. You will not, I promise you will not put that book down. It is so beautifully written and so eloquently she has put together the ideas and thoughts for both the novice researcher, intermediate researcher, and advanced researchers. Carla Willig.
Got it. And Anil, I'll definitely connect with you offline as well.
Please,
So thank you very
do
much.
that. Please do that. I'm always available for any bouncing of any ideas, thoughts, feelings, whatever.
Thank you.
Who wants to go? Who hasn't spoken and wants to go? This is no pressure. If you want to say, if you don't, go ahead.
This is
Hello,
me.
sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
Ranjita.
Ranjita. Go ahead, Ranjita.
No.
Ajanta,
No,
everybody
Ranjita,
wants to-
please follow.
Hey,
Bacha
you're
mein
special.
follow.
Ajanta, because you're special, they want to keep you last. So go ahead, Ranjita.
Okay, sir.
Ranjita.
Okay, what I want to say is that I have just started my doctoral journey. So, like, this is for the first time I intend to collect some primary data in my life. Like, whole life, I have just used this secondary, that is called quantitative data. So, this is the first time I'll be using it and collecting it. So, I think I have a lot to learn how to like do this interview and all, because I have no such prior experience. But still, from this, I have got my basic concepts clear. Like from IPA, I think I can use IPA in my
Yes.
study.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, she's at ISEC, and I've done a workshop at ISEC about 4 or 5 years ago for on-site in Bangalore, and which went really well. So it's been very exciting. So thank you, Ranjita, for sharing, and
Thank you.
we can go to Ajanta next. Ajanta.
Yeah, thank you so very much. In fact, very honestly, I'm feeling very proud. I'm feeling very happy because I've been doing this, I've been working as a qualitative research practitioner for the last 21 years.
Oh boy.
And prior to that, I was, a full-timer in various other sectors in Bombay, Kolkata, and other places. I just want to tell you all one thing, boss. We have already started off, with online qualitative. So when Kiran was talking about this study on yoga, or when Siddharth was saying, talking about research in the finance sector, I'm very, very intrigued and glad to tell you all that qualitative research can happen in all the sectors. And I've actually been doing it literally. I mean, not just in India, but abroad, not just the urban areas, but the rural areas as well. So it's a huge territory. And thank you so very much, Anil. This was amazing. You again made me fall in love with qualitative all over again after 21 years of steadiness. Okay.
Wonderful.
So thank you. Thanks to each of you. And you all can definitely connect with me in case you want to know anything about qualitative research. I would love to share the experiences. We can
and that's why, we are very fortunate. We have a very small group. Okay, or 11, totally 11 people. And that's why usually what I do when a group is very large, I don't share the emails of everybody because, sometimes people just don't know. They indiscreetly start using your email and start sending you other messages. But this is a very small, everybody knows everyone else. So please feel free, all the emails are copied, to go ahead and contact each other, right? For anything that, and keep me in the loop if you want. If not, that's okay too. I'm fine. Many of us are connected on LinkedIn already. We are not connected. Let's connect on LinkedIn. I think that's a good way to exchange ideas, notes, and because I think learning really happens when you create a support group of, because different people. What I'm really enamored by the fact is that everybody here, every participant here, has a different stage of their journey, different stage of their learning, different stage of their growth and academic and professional growth, and which becomes so meaningful, so as questions come up, as ideas come up, it becomes more and more exciting for me. So I'm going to spare the last two who wanted to talk in Kannada. I don't know whether they feel comfortable doing that. But
no, they actually had to leave, but they were really thankful for the workshop as well.
Okay, good. I'm so
They
happy
just
that, because
texted
it
me,
became
so
a
yeah.
little late. Sorry, it became a little late, and I thank you for your patience, because I know, like I said, it's morning time for me, but it's night time for you now. And thank you once again from the bottom of my heart for your participation. Most importantly, for your active participation, because nobody was sitting back and just watching a lecture or listening to a lecture. You all put your feet wet, got your feet wet, and dipped your toes into this in a very, very meaningful way. And I'm hoping that something really exciting will come out of this. Now, I'll do the recording and everything, and then I'll share both links with you, either today or by tomorrow morning via email. Okay. Thanks again. Have a good night.
Thank you.
And take care.
Thank
and
you.
good luck to all of you. And feel free to
Thank
contact
you,
me.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Take care. Bye.
ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ